Hey guys, welcome to Travel Feels. Today we're going to be reviewing the Olympus OMD E-M1 Mark II. So there's no doubt that the E-M1 Mark II is a great stills camera, but we wanted to test out how the video functions are. You guys probably saw that me and Peter McKinnon were in Italy and Switzerland, driving around in Porsches. We were going through the Alps, testing out the cameras in all sorts of different conditions. And we found out that not only is it a great stills camera, but it has some really nice video functions as well. With one in particular that just blew our minds, it was super good. So let's run through some of the features of the camera and see if this is the right camera for you. First off, it has a really nice clean 4K image. It's a lot nicer than most of the 4K DSLRs that are out there right now. It's a 237 megabit rate, which means it's really high quality 4K. Just to put that into perspective, the Sony a7R2s and a7S II, they run at a bitrate of about 100. So this is a really good quality 4K codec, which is a huge thing to have in such a small package. Another big plus is the flip LCD screen. I think that every DSLR should have a flip LCD screen, so I really like that this camera has a flip out LCD screen that swivels pretty much in any direction that you want. This way, whether you're filming down low or up high, or if you're vlogging and you want to film yourself, you can see what's going on. I don't understand why they don't just put a flip LCD screen on every camera. So flip LCD screen, huge plus in my books. Next, battery life, really good on the Olympus. It lasted for hours, way better than the Sony's, rivals the GH4 and GH5, I think. Just really impressive. I love long battery life. That's one of my biggest pet peeves of the Sonys, is that the batteries only last for like an hour maybe, whereas this will last you multiple hours. I only ever really used 2 batteries in one day of shooting. Mind you, I wasn't shooting all day long, but I was shooting quite a bit. So long battery life, big plus for me. One of the big things that I look at is usability of the camera. And we were literally handed the camera at the Milan airport when we landed, and in no time we were shooting just fine with it. It's a really easy camera to use, super intuitive, menus make sense, button layout, everything works for me. I just customized some of the buttons to my liking. And yeah, just a really nice, easy to use camera. But the best video feature in this camera is definitely the image stabilization. I've never used a camera with image stabilization like this camera has. There were literally times where I would be at 100 mil and I'd be on a boat or in a car and I could get steady, stable shots, almost like I was on a gimbal or even a tripod. It was super impressive. Just blew my mind so many times how stable the footage is. Especially if you combine it with something like this, the 12-100 lens. It has image stabilization built in, and it works in tandem with the image stabilization in the camera. So you have 2 layers of image stabilization, and then you can still add electronic stabilization through the camera on top of that. So that's 3 layers of image stabilization. So I was on the 12-100 mil a lot for this shoot. Just a really nice lens, great range. And with the image stabilization, there was just some crazy shots that I could get that almost looked like a gimbal or a dolly even at times. I remember there was one time when we were in Venice on a boat and I had my camera out at 100 mil and I was just scoping out different people on the other side of the shore. I could get these really cool parallax shots that were just so stable. It was almost like you were on a gimbal or had some sort of dolly system going on. Using the 100mm, which is, with the crop, it's like a 200mm on a full frame, which is just crazy that it was that stable. It was just something that I've never been able to do with any other camera before. There was another time when I was in the back of our follow car and I was just sitting back there handheld, filming the two Porsches, and I was getting amazing footage, just like with a gimbal or had some sort of stabilizer, but it was literally just the camera by itself and this lens, the 12 to 100mm. Super versatile combination. I had a lot of fun testing out the camera with this lens. So in my mind, the image stabilization in the camera is the best feature of this camera. It just makes it a really cool system where you can travel super lightweight, you don't need any other support or stabilizers, and you can get almost tripod-like shots or gimbal-like shots with just the camera and lens. Now the drawback to that image stabilization is that if you're on the very wide end of the lens, you start to introduce some wobble on the corners. This happens with any image stabilization in all the cameras on the wide end of the lens. But because the image stabilization is so good and so powerful, it starts to get really wobbly if you have it at the most wide end of the lens. So that's something to keep in mind. Test it out, check it out, and see where it starts to disappear. But especially when you're on the long end of the lens, it's just insane, the stabilization. Another negative of a micro four thirds camera like the Olympus E-M1 Mark II is that you're not gonna get as much shallow depth of field. Because it is a smaller sensor than a full frame or a Super 16 sensor, you just don't get as much depth of field. So that's something to keep in mind. But with something like the 25mm 1.2, you can get a lot of shallow depth of field still. But it's just something you have to keep in mind. It's not quite the same as a full frame sensor. It's also not a low light monster like some other cameras because it is a micro four thirds sensor, but I think it handled low light pretty well. And what I did notice is that when you did have a higher ISO and you had more noise, it was a really fine pattern noise, which means you can easily take that noise out in post. Whereas some cameras like the Panasonics, as soon as you go too high, it just like ruins the whole image. The resolution just falls apart, the colors go all crazy, and it's more of this big noise that's really hard to take out in post. So yeah, it's not a low light monster, but still pretty decent. I don't think you'd have any troubles with it really. I think it's because of the high quality 4K codec that it just handles the noise much better than a lot of cameras that I've seen. So the big question is, who is this camera for? What kind of shooting style is this the best camera for? And I would say it's the best camera for people who want to do photography, but also want some high-end video features on their camera and don't want to be lugging around a ton of equipment like gimbals or stabilizers to get good high-quality video. I think it's perfect for those people, especially if you're into traveling, because when you're traveling, you just don't have a lot of space to take around gimbals and all this other support equipment. Because of the image stabilization, you can get really nice shots just with the camera alone, which is hard to do with pretty much any other DSLR right now. No, I'm not gonna be shooting any commercials with it or any super high-end stuff, but it's a great little system for traveling or anything where I just don't wanna be lugging around a ton of equipment. Any smaller budget things where you just don't have the crew or the equipment to get crazy dolly shots or gimbal shots. This camera is a great alternative. The image stabilization is by far my favorite feature of the camera. It works great for photos and in video. Some of the other guys were taking long exposure photos with no tripod and they were still coming out really sharp and clean, which is super impressive. I haven't seen any other photo cameras be able to do that. Time-lapse functions are also built in. It just has a lot of good stuff in a really small body that's just lightweight and easy to take around. Negatives aside, I think this is a really great camera. I do recommend it, especially for photographers who also want to dabble in video. Also, the price point is pretty affordable when you compare it to cameras like the Sonys. So yeah, just a really great camera overall. It is unfortunate that the camera doesn't have a log profile. There is some functions that you can turn on that makes it a little bit more log-like, but there is no S-Log or C-Log built into this camera, which is okay, but it is something that I do wish it had. So yeah, if you're interested in this camera, get your hands on one, test it out, see if it's the right camera for you. Also, if you haven't done so already, go and check out the website for our travels from that trip with Olympus. There's tons of great content on there, including some chances to win some free cameras. They're giving away some tough TG4s. So go and check that out and enter to win a free camera. Go and check out the BTS video from the trip and check out Peter's vlogs. I'll link them down below. It was just an amazing trip. We just had such a good time. Just some epic stuff happened. It's a trip that I won't be forgetting for a long time. That's it for me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this little review. I hope it gave you some more information about this camera if you're interested in it. Enjoy the filmmaking process and go make some travel memories.